We will begin today, as we do pretty much every Sunday, with the Three Refuges, followed by the Heart Sutra, which starts on page 7 of our Rituals and Practices booklet. And if you don't have a copy of that handy, you can find the link in the chat. It's already there. And at the end of the Dharma Talk, everyone will be unmuted and there will be space for conversation and connection, what we're calling our virtual tea time. So we hope that you will join us there. And then finally, a deep bow to Lucas, who is supporting all of our tech needs this morning. To begin our time together today, please join me in reciting the Three Refuges, followed by chanting the Heart Sutra, pages 7 and 8 in the ritual booklet. I go to refuge to Buddha, my deeply awakened mind, the living source of understanding and compassion, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go to refuge to Dharma, the path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy, and enlightenment, the way of peace, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go to refuge to the Sangha, the loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I am aware that the three jewels are within my heart. I vow to realize them. I vow to understand living beings and their suffering. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and compassion and to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to live simply and sanely, content with few possessions, and to keep my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worry and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly so that understanding and compassion will flower, and I can help living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. And now the Heart Sutra. The Maha Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. The Bodhisattva of great compassion, from the deep practice of Prajna Paramita, perceived the emptiness of all five skandhas and delivered all beings from their suffering. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is emptiness, emptiness form. The same is true of feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. They are not born nor annihilated. They are not defiled nor immaculate. They do not increase nor decrease. So in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no thought, no impulse, no consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of consciousness, no ignorance, nor extinction of ignorance, no old age and death, nor extinction of them, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cease from suffering, no path to lead out of suffering, no knowledge, no attainment, no realization, for there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva holds on to nothing but prajna, paramita. Therefore, the mind is clear of any delusive hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Away from all perverted views, one reaches final nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future, through faith in prajna paramita, attain to the highest perfect enlightenment. Know then the prajna paramita is the great Dharani, the radiant, peerless mantram, the utmost supreme mantra, which is capable of allaying all pain. This is true beyond all doubt. Proclaim now the highest wisdom, the prajna paramita. Gate, gate, para, gate, para samgate, bodhiswaha. Gate, gate, para, gate, para samgate, bodhiswaha. Gate, gate, para, gate, para samgate, bodhiswaha. The Maha Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. Good morning, Sangha, and a special welcome to anyone who may be joining us for the very first time. During the pandemic over the last year, there have been so many acts of generosity. People stepping forward to help others, shopping and delivering food to those who were homebound, connecting with those who were cut off from their loved ones, offering support to those who had lost their livelihoods. And let's not forget the medical professionals, first responders, and frontline workers who put everything on the line in service to others. So many generous actions taken on behalf of others. This morning's Dharma Talk will be about generosity, one of the 6 paramitas or perfections, which include giving or generosity, which in this context we're going to use interchangeably, integrity, perseverance, diligence, meditation, and wisdom, or prajna. So we just chanted the Heart Sutra, which starts out with the Maha Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. Prajna means wisdom, but not wisdom in the usual sense, just simple sense of knowing. It's the wisdom of non-duality, the reconciliation of perceived opposites, and the acceptance of wholeness as reality. Paramita is a word that has two meanings. One is perfection, and the other is gone or going beyond. Again, the Heart Sutra ends with the mantra Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhiswaha, which translates basically into gone, gone, gone beyond, altogether beyond. And here, going beyond implies that there is this shore and that shore. This shore is the shore of suffering, and the other shore is the shore of liberation. So how are we going to get from the shore of self-clinging and suffering to the shore of liberation? Suzuki Roshi once said that once you know how to live correctly on this shore, you are already on the other shore. There really is no place to go. Giving or generosity, integrity, perseverance, diligence, meditation, and wisdom are the practices of the Bodhisattvas, which is why this sutra and the Paramitas are so important in Mahayana Buddhism and so important to the teachings of our temple. Starting in chapter 1 of the second book of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha taught the Dharma to the Bodhisattvas with respect to the 6 perfections or Paramitas, causing them to attain highest complete enlightenment. In chapter 2, which is all about skillful means, the Buddha says, all those sentient beings who encountered and heard the teaching of the Buddhas of the past and who accumulated various merits through acts of giving, generosity, integrity, perseverance, diligence, meditation, and wisdom, the 6 perfections, have certainly attained the path of the Buddhas. So to start our exploration of generosity, what is it? Merriam-Webster says that generosity is the quality or fact of being generous. So there's limited helpfulness there. So what does generous mean? And I found 2 definitions there. The first is characterized by a noble or kindly spirit, like a generous heart. And the second is liberal in giving, such as a generous benefactor. Let's also look at how generosity is manifested. What are the different kinds of generosity? When we first consider generosity, perhaps some of us might initially think of giving material goods or money, but material giving is only part of the picture, which also includes giving our time and energy, giving our attention, giving thanks, giving our presence, giving encouragement, even giving the benefit of the doubt. Giving or offering the teachings of the Buddha. The only limits to the kinds of generosity we can come up with are the constructs or limitations that we create in our own minds. To balance generosity to others, it should also be said that we should also be generous to ourselves. We sometimes go too far in terms of giving to others and neglect to look after ourselves. And in the long term, if we're going to sustain our giving to others, then we have to make sure that we have something to give. So we need to make sure that we offer ourselves time to rest, to eat well, to meditate, to be joyful. There are also many physical benefits of generosity, or maybe physiological benefits of generosity. In 2020, the Mayo Clinic released an article called Why Giving is Good for Your Health. And in it, researchers outlined the following benefits of giving or generosity: lower blood pressure, increased self-esteem, less depression, lower stress levels, longer life, greater happiness and satisfaction. The article also stated that there is scientific evidence that when being generous, humans secrete feel-good chemicals in our brains, such as serotonin, which is a mood-mediating chemical, dopamine, which is a feel-good chemical, and oxytocin, which controls key aspects of our reproductive systems, but also serves as a social bonding and trust and relationship building chemical. From Perhaps a psychological view or a more Buddhist point of view, here are additional benefits of generosity. Eliminates miserliness or stinginess, rids one of deviousness, agitation, and regret, rids one of shame and blame, rids one of covetousness, arrogance, and hatefulness, helps one embody wholesome thoughts and actions, and aids in the development of wisdom. Of course, all of these benefits from generosity do not automatically come with sporadic acts of generosity, but only with a sustained practice of generosity, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So that's a little bit about what generosity is and some of the benefits of being generous. And now let's explore what generosity is not. Impure or tainted generosity can come in many forms. And here are a few examples of impure giving. Giving when you just don't care. Giving is a means of obtaining something. Generosity because one feels shame or guilt. Giving out of fear or terror. Generosity to manipulate someone or out of obligation. Giving to dominate. Giving out of jealousy. Or generosity to elevate oneself. Now, to offer an example of tainted giving, I'm going to share a story from my own life, from my past. And I offer this for illustrative purposes only. But what I'd like you to do is listen to this story within the context of the examples of impure or tainted generosity that you just heard. I will share this story in the way that I thought about my experience at the time, not how I think about it now. So many years ago, I was living and working in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, and my commute was about 10 minutes each way. But I eventually switched jobs from the northwest suburbs to the uptown neighborhood, which if you're familiar with Chicago, it's pretty near downtown Chicago. And that meant that with the oftentimes horrendous Chicago traffic, it could take me 2 hours to get to work in the morning and sometimes more than 2 hours to get home. And I was stuck where I was living because of my lease. Sometimes I was working 12 hours a day at a high pressure job at a refugee resettlement agency, and then had 4+ hours every day in the car. And over time, it wore me down. Now, just to be clear, all of the context I've just shared is not an excuse for the behavior I'm about to describe, but it does set the stage. So one evening, I was stuck in traffic in the far right lane. I was stopped way more than I was moving. And all I wanted to do was get home. And way ahead of me, I saw a car at the end of a very long merge lane with a left blinker on, trying to merge into the slow lane, and no one was letting this car in. I kept watching as we crept forward at a snail's pace, and car after car refused this driver's entry into the lane. And I started thinking about this person, how frustrated and perhaps even angry they must feel. They're sitting there clearly requesting passage to merge into the lane, and everyone is so focused on themselves and their own misery that they're not acknowledging this person's need. So more time went on, and I became fixated on this car. And soon I decided that if no one else let this driver in by the time I got there, then I was going to do the right thing and let him in. Even more time passes, and I even start to become excited about the idea of being the one to let this poor driver in. I thought to myself, he's going to be grateful. 10 minutes stuck trying to merge, and finally an unselfish person coming along, me, to offer him the space to continue on his journey. At one point, I even hoped that everyone who hadn't let this person in would see me let him in and feel some guilt about it. Maybe then at their next opportunity, they wouldn't be so selfish. So the big moment finally arrives. The car in front of me did not let him in. I stopped, opened my window, waved him into the lane with a huge smile on my face, so happy that I was the one who could finally let this driver in. And he immediately swerved abruptly into my lane, almost taking off my front bumper, cut off 2 more lanes of traffic, moving over into the fast lane, and disappeared into the only lane of traffic that was actually moving. I was stunned. And then I was a little angry. How could that driver sit there for all that time and then not even acknowledge the one person who was unselfish enough to let him in? Not only that, he almost caused 3 accidents getting into that far left lane. So I was fuming, mumbling to myself until I saw a woman in the minivan in the next lane over to the left, staring at me, mouth agape. And the expression on her face was, "Yep, Chicago traffic, another one finally cracked." On the way home, with plenty of time to think about my experience, and particularly the ego-driven train of thought that brought me to such a strong expectation of gratitude as the result of my generosity, I went from embarrassment to disbelief that my initial intent of generosity had turned out so wrong, and I learned from it. So let's revisit the examples of impure giving within the context of this one Chicago traffic story. Giving where one doesn't care. Okay, so this one definitely doesn't qualify because I cared a lot. Giving as a means of obtaining something. Yes, I wanted to obtain gratitude and acknowledgement from the driver in the car. Not only that, but acknowledgement from the other drivers that I had done something that they should have done in the first place. Generosity because one feels shame or guilt. Yes, if you remember, I had a moment when I thought about how the driver must have felt because no one was letting him in. I felt shame and guilt that the other drivers were letting him sit there for so long without offering aid. Generosity to manipulate someone. Yes, in a way. The transaction I had in mind was, I let him in, he gives me gratitude and acknowledgement that I was craving from this experience. Generosity out of obligation. Yes, I felt that if no one else was going to let this driver in, I had to be the one to do it. And this also relates to guilt. To dominate. Generosity to dominate. Oh yes, I had made plans for all the drivers as far as I could see. And in those moments, I had passed judgment on everyone around me. In my mind, I was in complete control of the situation. It was all about me, which I'm sure you could tell by the number of I, me, my language used in the retelling of my story. And generosity to elevate oneself. Yes, I was going to show the other drivers the right way to be, the kind way to be, the unselfish way to be, that in a way, I was better than them in this particular moment for my generosity. Now let's talk about pure giving or pure generosity, the opposite of the example I just shared. Generosity, giving, or dana, is the practice of giving. It's not the concept of giving or the definition from Merriam-Webster. It's not even the act of giving itself. It's the practice of giving. So what does that mean, the practice of giving? Intention plus action. Pure intention plus pure action. Now, in the example I shared, there was definitely intention, which was the commitment to let the driver in, and there was action, actually letting the driver in. But the generosity I was offering was tainted by my own ego, attachments, expectations, and judgments. It was in no way pure. What would have been a pure and untainted, generous response to the situation I described? I noticed the car way ahead of me, observe that the driver wants to merge into the lane, and remain present in the moment until I observe that I have an opportunity to let this person in. And I let him in with no attachments or expectations about anything that happens after that. Pure generosity is a complete relinquishment of any deluded sense of control, with no claim or hope of generosity ever coming back to you. Another way to think about pure giving or pure generosity is through the lens of non-duality. If I'm giving something to someone, and I think of myself as the giver and the other person as the receiver, and the object being given as the gift, then we're already perceiving the giver and the receiver as different, as separate, perhaps even creating a false power dynamic between the two. This way of thinking offers a whole host of opportunities to get caught up in expectations, attachments, dualism, and one's own ego self. Conversely, if I think of myself, the other person, and the object being given, not as separate entities, but as part of one great big, expansive, interconnected ecosystem of wholeness, then who is to say who is the giver? Who is to say who's the receiver? When you consider generosity through the lens of non-duality, oneness instead of separateness, all that's left is the act of generosity. So let's go back to the passage from the Lotus Sutra that I read at the top of this talk. The Buddha says, all those sentient beings who encountered and heard the teaching of the Buddha of the past and who accumulated various merits through acts of the six perfections have certainly attained the path of the Buddhas. Merit here, in its simplest terms, means something like a beneficial force which accumulates as a result of good speech, acts, or thoughts. Merit can produce good and pleasant results in this lifetime and all future lifetimes, and can contribute to a person's progress toward enlightenment. If we generate merit from an act of generosity or patience or morality, we could do nothing with that merit, and it would certainly aid us on our own path to individual liberation. There are millions of Buddhists who follow this particular way of being, this philosophy. At the Grand Rapids Buddhist Temple, we follow Mahayana Buddhism, the path of the Bodhisattva. And what that means is that we don't concern ourselves with our own liberation, but any merit that we may accumulate from our speech, our thoughts, or our actions is to be offered for the benefit of others on their path to liberation. So what is the most generous action we can take with the accumulation of our own merit? We can dedicate any merit that we may accumulate in our daily lives to others. We give it away with no attachment, no ego, no expectations about how or if it may come back to us, or how or if it may affect our path to awakening. At any point in the day, you can stop what you're doing and offer any merit that you may have accumulated for the benefit of others. Merit that you accumulate through your job, through your relationships with others, for preparing a meal for someone who is ill, for meditating on the well-being of others. Another example of when you can offer your merit, and this is a personal practice of mine, is when the bell rings at the end of your meditation, like it will this morning at the end of our meditation. You can take that time to dedicate any merit that you may have accumulated through your contemplation, or any results that may come of that, to another person or to all beings. This is the practice of generosity. This is the way of the Bodhisattva, and it is one of the most profound acts of the Paramita of Generosity that we as Buddhists can offer other living beings. So for our meditation today, it will be silent, but please contemplate a few recent acts of generosity that you personally have bestowed on others. Consider whether your acts of generosity began with pure intention, followed by pure action. Think deeply about whether your generosity contained any of the elements of impure giving. And if you discover through your contemplation that some of your acts of generosity have contained impure elements, consider how you might work on transforming these impure elements into a purity of generosity. When the bell rings at the end of our meditation, in your own way, dedicate any merit that you may have accumulated so far today for the benefit of all living beings. Just do this silently in your own way. And I'll leave a little bit of time for this after the bell sounds. Please prepare for meditation. Okay, if you haven't already, please take the next few seconds to dedicate your merit, if you choose, in the way that is most meaningful to you, and dedicate your merit to all living beings. And we bow together. Okay, if you thought that that was the longest meditation in the history of the Grand Rapids Buddhist Temple, you would be right. I have not been able to unmute myself for probably about 20 minutes. So deepest apologies for that delay. I hope you've got some good meditation time in. And thanks to Kent for kind of saving the day. So let's go ahead and turn to page 9 to recite the closing gapas. And we say together, for all unskillful action ever committed by me, sets a hold on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thoughts. Now I atone for them all. Vast is the robe of compassion, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Buddha's teachings for the benefit of all sentient beings. All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passion, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates without number, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain.